What's up, guys? I'm Nicole Rios, and I've got opinions. Today, I am going to talk about my opinion on ICE and the deportations and the seemingly change in sentiment with the way people feel like President Trump is handling deportations and all of the ups and downs that have happened with ICE in the last couple of weeks. I think that I want to start by saying that when I first heard about the shooting with Renee Good and I watched the initial video, I felt sadness and shock, and I was despondent, honestly. I don't think that any real American ever wants things to come to this place, no matter what side you stand on. And I think that it's a shame for both parties involved. It's a shame that Renee Good lost her life, and it's also a shame that this law enforcement officer was put in a position where he had to choose. I don't think that he went to work that day thinking that he was going to end up using his firearm. So that is my starting position. To build on that, I think that we have gotten to a point as a society where through the last 15 years of social justice reform and defund the police and the undermining of authority and law enforcement in our culture and in our country, that we are exactly where I would expect us to be under those circumstances. I have a personal story that informs my opinion on law enforcement and the authority of law enforcement. And it might surprise you, but I'm going to share it because I think that it expresses why it's important. Okay. I had a very challenging adolescence. I did not grow up in my teenage years under the best of circumstances, and it sent me on a road that I regret. I was underage, and meaning under 18, and I got myself into a situation where I was sitting with my therapist at the time, and she thought that I was going to hurt myself. I told her that I was not going to hurt myself, but I was having a hard time, and she told me that she wanted me to go to the hospital. I didn't want to go to the hospital. I didn't think I needed to be, committed to the hospital or a psych ward. And so I left her office and I started walking down the road to where I was living at the time. And I put my earbuds in and I was walking. And it was winter. There was a lot of rock salt on the ground. There was a lot of snow out. Not a lot of pedestrians. And I heard this police cruiser pull up behind me. And I heard a police officer get out. And I heard him call to me from behind. And I played dumb, like I didn't hear him. And I felt justified in my own self-interest that nobody could tell me what I was going to do, especially be committed against my will into a psychiatric hospital. The police officer came up behind me, put his hand on my arm from behind, and even though I knew this was a police officer, I responded by ripping my arm out of his grip and turning around and swinging on him. Now, this obviously led to a tussle, and he and I both ended up on the ground wrestling until his partner came around and put his knee in my back, and they got me cuffed. Now, in the meantime, after the fact, the charges that I was charged with were exacerbated because apparently I had hit this police officer in his genitals, which I didn't do intentionally, but happened. In addition to the fact that he ended up needing to get stitches on his hand because the rock salt and the cement on the ground when we were grappling ripped open his hand. And so this police officer ended up with severe injuries because of that interaction with me. Now, I still ended up in the psych ward. They brought me there for a week. And then the police came directly to the hospital to pick me up and bring me to jail. And that's where I sat because my parents didn't want to bail me out. And it had been a culmination of bad decisions that finally ended me in a place where I had to face a consequence. Okay? And I sat in that jail waiting for my arraignment, waiting for my judge to choose what was going to happen to me, and facing very serious charges. Okay? And I can tell you that in that jail cell, I had my rock bottom moment where all of a sudden I realized there is so much more in life for me than this. This is not where I'm choosing to stay. And I chose at that time to turn my life around, to take responsibility for my actions. In my arraignment, I explained my situation to the judge. Thankfully, the judge could hear in my heart that there was purpose for me in my life and that I could be a productive member of society. And after a long period of working my way back into being able to operate in society after that, I have. Okay? And my point in telling you this is that during that altercation with that police officer, I had the mistaken thought that the authority was mine. And the reality is, it's not. When it comes to law enforcement, it is a pipe dream to think that you have any authority above them. And while generally it is very hard to give up control and give up authority, we all agree that we will abide by the authority of our laws. That's part of what we agree to living in America, that we're going to follow these laws because that's how we live in a civilized society, is that we have this agreement, okay? You know where they don't have this agreement? In Peru, for example. I was just talking to my adopted father, who is from Peru, has just spent months there, and comes back and nobody follows laws. They don't follow street signs. There's no safe driving. You guys, we live in the society that we live in because we all agree that we will follow these laws. And that's why we are a successful country, and that's why we are a productive country, okay? Because our laws that we have also provide us a significant amount of freedoms. A significant amount. Okay? But the second that we cross that line, we lose those freedoms. When I look at this situation with ICE, all I see is a spoiled people who have forgotten that we live and abide by a social contract that includes respecting our laws. And that the people who therefore reinforce those laws are not the bad guy. They are not the enemy. They are the authority we all agree that we will obey and abide by, okay? In what world has it ever been okay to impede on a traffic stop, for example? To drive up to a police officer who has someone pulled over and say, "Excuse me, sir," and videotape the whole thing. Okay, you can videotape. I'll take that back. You can videotape, that's your right. But to impede? But to put your vehicle in between his vehicle and the person he's trying to talk with or give a ticket to? No. The heck are you talking about? We've never been able to do anything like that. And for some reason, the framing of ICE is the Gestapo and Nazi this and Nazi that all of a sudden has brainwashed people into thinking they're not real law enforcement. They're real law enforcement, y'all. You see police across their vests. You see a firearm on their side. They go through training. They have all of the liability and insurance protection. They're federal agents, y'all. This is not some sheriff or constable or some shit. Okay, you want to argue with me that a constable shouldn't have the right to arrest somebody? You got my number. Okay, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about federal agents. Okay? And if you don't like it, call your congressman and let's get the training changed. But when it comes to the shooting of Renee Good, all I have to say is, I am sorry she's dead, okay? But the reality of the situation is, you cannot put a law enforcement officer in a position where he fears for his life and think there is no consequence for that. Period. There is a consequence for that. And my argument on this whole thing is the lack of consequence that people have faced for the last 15 years has brought them down the emboldened path to think that this is A-okay to do. And what I can tell you is, in my personal experience, the only thing that taught me it's not okay to do it is getting my ass put in jail and sitting there and realizing, no, you don't have the authority you think you do. You're not as big and bad as you think you are. There is a power greater than you that can take control of your life. And I'm sorry if you have been mistaken by thinking as an American, you have some ultimate authority. You don't. You have the responsibility to live amongst the rest of us, following the laws that the rest of us follow. You're not special. Okay? And I understand you wanting to stand up and fight for something that means something that makes sense. But I implore you to go read a list of the charges, the convictions of the people that they were rounding up in Minnesota that Renee Good was protecting. Okay? Matter of fact, give me 1 second. I'm going to read you the list. I wasn't prepared to do this, but the reality of the situation is all you need to know is a couple of them. Okay? All you need to hear is a couple because it's disgusting. And we have people who are out here on the street fighting for these people instead of fighting for their own communities and protecting their communities, which is shocking to me. Again, I'm here for you to fight for a cause. So let me just explain to you the cause you're fighting for. How about that? We'll start there, okay? Because at the end of the day, law enforcement, these guys have orders for deportation, okay? They have convictions. You want to say, oh, they're rounding up the moms and dads. Okay, here we go. First one, illegal alien convicted of a strong-arm sodomy of a boy and a strong-arm sodomy of a girl with a deportation order since 2018. An illegal alien convicted of sexual assault and sodomy of a girl under age 13 and procuring a child for prostitution with a deportation order since 2006. An illegal alien convicted of the strong-arm rape of a 12-year-old girl and kidnapping a child with the intent to sexually assault her with a deportation order since 2004. Illegal alien convicted of strong-arm rape, aggravated assault with a weapon, and strangulation with a deportation order since 12. Illegal alien convicted rape of a child and fondling with a deportation order since 03. Rape with a weapon, sexual assault of a child, and DUI. Convicted homicide, convicted of 3 counts of homicide, convicted homicide, 2 counts of homicide. Okay, guys? So you tell me whether you think Renee Good losing her life is worth keeping that kind of immigrant in our country. Because I don't really think there's an argument for it. I think her life was worth way more than that. Why did she do that? She has a 6-year-old at home. This is what I'm saying, the thought process, you guys. I cannot imagine a world where I know that people in my neighborhood and my city are out there raping and sodomizing little kids when I have an 8-year-old. And I'm going to put myself at risk in the middle of the street, in the middle of the day, during the week when I should be working to stop a law enforcement officer from coming and getting in that guy from my neighborhood? Huh? I can't make that make sense. I also think ICE agents are human. And the reality of the situation is all of these subversive tactics that these rioters are using are literal torture tactics. They are CCP, subversive, make people crazy tactics. Blowing whistles, crazy lights. You are intentionally putting someone in a psychological condition that forces them to have impeded judgment and irritability. And then you're going to claim victim when something bad happens because of it? That shit is crazy. You cannot create your own situation, i.e. me walking out of my therapist's office when she told me she was going to call the cops, knowing the cop pulled up behind me, choosing to ignore him, choosing to rip my arm out of his grip when I knew it was a police officer trying to stop me. All of my own circumstance, y'all. Oh, but he shouldn't have touched you. Listen, I made every argument for myself that I could have. Oh, I didn't know it was a police officer. He shouldn't have grabbed me from behind. He should have identified himself. Fuck that. You don't have the authority. If a police officer gives you an order, you follow it. You guys, this is just basic risk management. That man has a fucking gun on his hip. And you think you could just be emboldened to talk shit? Do you have a brain? I'm not even talking in the capacity of law enforcement. I'm talking about human to human. You don't know anything about that person. You don't know what is going to trigger them. You must have some level of like non-self-preservation, because there is no way that knowing this person has a firearm, that he's a trained marksman, that I am going to go out there and intentionally mess with these people. Intentionally do psychological warfare on them while they're trying to do their job. Listen, y'all, you pay the taxes. You're paying for this man to be out here, and then you're just causing him trouble. It's so pointless. That is not going to stop these people from being deported. It's just going to make them come 10 times harder. Now we look at then yesterday. A legal alien gets pulled over in traffic stop, then runs away and ends up getting shot in the leg. Okay, I guess it's better, right? It's the leg. The person's not dead. Okay, are we happy with that as an improvement in operational integrity? At some level, they're human, you guys. At some level, these are people that have to make last minute decisions. They shouldn't have to. We should be having the people that run these cities and states working with ICE. We're countrymen. This is not the Gestapo. This is the psychological psyop that has operated since they started creating this narrative. Because obviously, you guys, we don't want the Gestapo. But the reality of the situation is this is not a racial cleansing. This is getting illegal rapists and people who are not contributing to our communities in a good way out. They're not being killed. They're being deported to the country from which they came. And if they're going to somewhere else, it is under a judge's consideration. They are getting their due process. Like I said, all of those lists had deportation orders, some from 20 years ago, deportation orders from 20 years ago, because of these crimes, because of these convictions. So I don't want to hear, oh, but what about the people who have been here for 20 years? Dude, where's the line then? There's no philosophy. If we apply some high level philosophy to this, okay? And we look at like deontology. And we say, okay, whatever we apply to one thing, in order for it to be good, it has to be able to be applied universally. You can't do that by drawing a red line on saying, okay, well, people who have been here for 15 years, we should let them stay. Why? It's arbitrary. And then you want to argue that on some moral ground. We can't do that, you guys. The moral ground is the law. I'm sorry if you don't like it and it doesn't match up to your morals. But again, our process in society is to be able to protest that, which is fine. Do your protesting. But protesting and rioting are not the same thing. Protesting and impeding are not the same thing. And then the second option out is to call your congressman and lobby your senator and make a difference when it comes to the policies and the regulations that they have to follow. And if you're not willing to go down either of those paths in a pure American way, then you are not out for the best interest of America. And you are just intentionally being a subversive force. Now, I'm a patriot, and I'm not going to watch my country fall. And I'm not going to tolerate people who don't want to follow our law and order. I face the consequences of my actions, and guess what? It made me better. It made me a better person for it. I love America for it. And now I have the utmost respect for the authority of the police and law enforcement because I know what they go through on a regular basis. And I could have even argued some mental health shit, and I chose not to, okay? The reality of the situation is people have gotten so juiced on their own opinion that they forget that we don't run on that. We don't run on personal morals. We run on the bounds of our law. And President Trump has not written these immigration laws, you guys. These immigration laws existed for all of time. And just because Biden chose not to enforce them does not mean that Trump is a bad guy for doing it. And I'm sorry, I get it. When you think it's easy street and then the consequences start hitting, it's uncomfortable. We don't like it. That's human nature. This is like parenting a child. You're going to end up with a spoiled kid if you never let them face their consequences. And here we are. When I think about what I want in a leader, I think that my vision of a leader goes to God. Okay? I want my leader to aspire to the qualities of my Lord and Savior. Okay? And you know what that means to me? That means doing the right thing when it's hard to do. It means going against the grain because it's right. Going against the grain when it is unpopular because it's going to serve the people. Now, don't mistake me and say that I'm calling Trump God. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I admire a leader who does what's unpopular. And as these ICE numbers of approval are falling, I don't care. It's still right. And while there may be these crazy one-off situations where an ICE officer acts out of character or out of regulation or outside the law, then it should be dealt with. But we can't have an opinion on what's outside the law when it's not. The Renee Good shooting was within the law. I'm sorry. I'm not going to say it was a good shot. I wish it didn't happen. I wouldn't characterize it as good. But what I'm saying is it wasn't illegal. It was within his rights to act. If it was a pedestrian on the street who was carrying and a car came at them like that, pretty sure they would have the same right to act. And just because he had a ICE jacket on, now he's somehow a murderer. You guys, our country needs to get back to the place where we respect authority. You are not greater than the laws that you're bound by. Nothing makes you special. We all live under the same laws. If you've never faced the consequences, or you've never dealt with law enforcement, or you aren't law enforcement, maybe don't have an opinion on this one. It's not for the sensitive. At the end of the day, we need a leader that's going to put the hammer down. We need a leader that's going to say no more crime. That is what I voted for. Getting these people out of here is what I voted for. And I'm going to tell you something. That list of convictions that I just read to you, none of them are Somali. None of them are even Mexican. The majority of those convictions were from men from Laos. This isn't a racist thing. There are bad people that do not follow our laws, that take away from society and create victims. And then there are people that disagree with that being a possibility in their communities, and they fight against it. And when it comes down to it, these people that are out there rioting now and burning down Minnesota again, you're ruining your own community. And you're going to tell me that that person has enough logic to think through this is a good idea. When they're burning down and looting their own CVS that they're going to have to go to next week to get deodorant. That's not logical thought, you guys. This is not this. We've left the point of rational. And now I can't help but think this isn't intentionally, again, I go back to it. These are subversive tactics. The blowing the whistle, the flashes, the loud music, the banging pots. You guys, it's warfare. It's psychological warfare on these guys. And we're allowing it as protest. So, Big Beautiful Bill just got funded. 2026. Lots of money in there for ICE. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, with the technology that is coming out, I have a huge feeling that a lot of these guys are not going to be on the streets anymore, and we're going to be using a lot of drones. And to be honest with you, I think it improves the safety for everybody. If these guys aren't having to interact with people on the street the way they are now, and we'll have bird's eye view of everything happening. Listen, you guys, my son is 8. He has impulsive behavior like I did when I was a kid. Genetic. What do you want to do? Now, if I don't teach him that he cannot just act on his impulses, am I responsible? Am I a responsible parent? No. That's not how the world works. And for a lot of people, they didn't have a parent. They didn't have a parent that showed them consequences. They didn't have a parent that said, you can't talk like that to people, or you can't behave that way. And at the end of the day, once you age out, guess what? The consequences come from the law. That's not Trump's fault. So here's my plea. Obey the law. Respect it. Understand that you are not on some higher authority. Understand that there are consequences for your actions. And qualify your self-preservation. I just don't think it's a good idea to be driving a vehicle towards a bunch of armed ICE agents. I don't think it's going to slow down, guys. They're not going to peel back on the deportations. It's one of the main things that Trump got elected for, is immigration. And there are people that I've spoken to that live in different countries, like Canada and Italy, that are basically like, you guys are behaving so stupidly. Yeah, I agree. And they're not saying that ICE is the ones behaving stupidly. They're looking at their immigration policies in their own countries and saying, this is all jacked up, you guys. We did it wrong. Why are you fighting to keep these people? Help them in their own countries so that they can have jobs there and they don't have to flee, which is another beneficial factor of this Venezuela thing. If Venezuela turns out to be a better place for these people to go back and live, then we have solved a huge issue on 2 fronts. After facing consequence and choosing not to be a victim of it, I think taking responsibility for our actions and changing based on that is something we all need to practice doing more. And to give somebody an out because they're protesting or an activist, no. You still get the same law everybody else does. And it's not up to you to decide when you've gone from 1 to 1. It's up to the law. It always has been. And again, just because daddy's home and he is enforcing the rules doesn't mean the rules didn't exist before. Is it uncomfortable for some? I guess. But again, think about that list. You're fighting to keep them in your community? No, can't do it, guys. And if we can't apply logic to this kind of stuff, I think that just exemplifies why we're so divided. I support ICE. I support all the work they're doing. I support them being able to do their jobs in safety. I support the takedown of all sanctuary cities via the law. I don't understand why the Supreme Court hasn't seen and ruled on that yet. And once these sanctuary cities start working with ICE in a safe way and releasing their illegal prisoners to ICE and allowing ICE to pick these guys up from county jails and the courthouses and everywhere else without a huge demonstration or provocation, we could get this done so much more safely. But instead, these guys have to go face all of these threats and all of these subversive attempts, which are organized, you guys. They're organized. They're funded. They're organized. They have training materials. They meet on a regular basis. They provide all of the whistles and all of the nonsense that these people bring to these protests. They admit to being paid to be there. And we want to say these people aren't domestic terrorists. Okay. Look up the definition of a domestic terrorist. You might be surprised. I know Christine Ohm caught some slack for using that to characterize Renee Good, but read the definition. Okay? She's not some innocent mom. She had a 6-year-old in a school that was teaching activism for kids. I want my 6-year-old to be reading and writing. I don't understand how activism plays into any of it. You guys, when it comes down to it, I really think that these people are just searching for purpose. And they are so far away from God that they've lost their perspective on what type of purpose is important. And at the end of the day, I just pray for them. And I pray that their hearts are open and their minds are opened to the reality of their behavior and what they're doing and who they're hurting and who they're actually protecting. And that maybe they gain some clarity. And are reminded of how many men and women have died for them to have the rights and freedoms they do. And to just maybe have a little respect for the laws that protect them. Have a good one, guys.